All right. Well, it is 5 past noon, so maybe we can go ahead and get started. I think it's going to be a fairly casual conversation. Welcome to our attendees. I hope everyone gets a lot out of this conversation, both our attendees and our panelists. So the first question is, tell us a little bit about the mentorship program or programs with which you've worked. And I'm going to start with Kirsten Duffin, because why not?
Okay. And I'll just give a brief introduction of myself. I am a professor and research support librarian at Eastern Illinois University, and I liaise with the science and math departments on campus here. I have a few experiences to share. I'll start with the EIU iSTEM mentoring program. iSTEM is our campus group whose mission is to support and empower students from underrepresented populations in the STEM fields. We offer peer mentoring for freshmen, sophomores, and transfers, as well as faculty mentoring, especially for upperclassmen and graduate students. This year, we are experiencing with peer mentoring in groups rather than pairs, with the hope that we can attract more mentee participants. Participants meet regularly throughout the academic year, and peer and faculty mentors are coordinated by a faculty advisor. I have participated with this group from our founding in 2019 through to the present. I've also worked with the ACRL Science and Technology section, or STS, mentoring program, which is a year-long formal mentoring program, especially for librarians new to STEM librarianship or changing positions, perhaps taking on new or increasing responsibilities. Mentors are fellow STEM librarians. The STS mentoring program is coordinated by the STS Professional Development Committee, and I participated with this group from 2021 to 2023. I've also been involved with the IRDL mentoring program, which is for participants in the Institute for Research Design in Librarianship, which is a year-long program for academic librarians wanting to increase their skills as researcher practitioners. Each scholar is paired with a mentor who is typically a past participant of IRDL. As a member of the 2019 cohort, I had a mentor for the 2019-2020 academic year, and I served as a mentor for a member of the 2022 cohort from 2022 to 23. At Booth Library, we do not have an official mentoring program for librarians. We are small and work very closely with one another. But when I first began in 2011, I was offered that I could select a librarian to serve as an informal mentor, which I did for a year. And lastly, I'll mention EIU's Women in Science and Math group, which was sunsetted upon the formation of EIU iSTEM. I served as a mentor 1 year for a student in this group in academic year 2017-18. And I mentioned this group because its mentoring program was informal compared to what I've encountered with some of my more recent experiences with mentoring programs, which have been more formally structured. So I would be happy to discuss any of these mentoring programs in greater depth during the webinar today.
Thank you, Kirsten. Leanne, tell us a little bit about yourself and introduce yourself in addition to telling us about the mentorship programs that you've worked with.
Sure, I'd be glad to. So, hi, everybody. I'm Leanne Vandekreek. I currently serve as the Associate Dean for Public Services at the Northern Illinois University Libraries. Prior to becoming an administrator, I served as a subject specialist liaison library for a long time, 17 years or so. So like Kirsten, throughout my career, I've been fortunate to participate in a variety of different mentorship programs, both as somebody who was mentored along in their career and now as someone who is mentoring others. So the first one that I'll mention is my most recent one, I guess, and that one is the MAC ALDP. So in true librarian fashion, I have to throw around a lot of acronyms, so I'll say what they are. So MAC is the Mid-American Conference, which is really our sports conference, but puts us aligned with other schools of similar size and programs. And ALDP was Academic Leadership Development Program. So I was a participant in that program during its inaugural year, which was in 2017. And they had participants from all the MAC schools. We had a mentor on our campus with whom me and the other NIU participants met with once a month, sometimes more frequently, but definitely once a month. And then he arranged for us to have meetings with various leaders and other academic administrators on our campus. And these were like very, I want to use the word intimate meetings, right? It was just the 3 participants and this person, whoever we were meeting with, and we got to really kind of just talk with them and ask them whatever questions, including the president of the university and the provost. And all of them were very, no holds bar, like ask me whatever you want kind of questions. So that was really a fabulous experience. And so then, in addition to these meetings that we were having with each other on our campus, there were 2 2-day-long workshops on site at other schools. So then everybody in the program got together, and we had tours and met with the leaders on those campuses, but we also had a lot of opportunity to kind of interact with each other and learn from each other. So then after I completed that program, I in turn kind of got flipped as NIU continued its participation in this MAC program. When we would have people come to visit or when we had new participants on our campus, I sat on a lot of panels and gave talks very similar to this one and offered some guidance. And I let it be known that I was willing to become part of this alumni network, both on our campus and then at this MAC ALDP program at large. So that was one of the larger ones that I participated in. Another program that I'm currently working with is one that's being newly developed on our campus. It's still, I would say, in its early phases. There have been a couple of different attempts through the years that stalled out. COVID obviously was one of the reasons, but there were various reasons why they didn't progress. And so now they're making another attempt, and I feel like this one is going to stick. This particular program is aimed at faculty on our campus who are moving into administrative roles, like department chairs, center directors, associate deans, that kind of thing. And for really up until now, there really wasn't any sort of formal program or training. It was like people felt like they had been faculty in a department for X amount of years, and it was their time had come kind of thing. I see some nodding, so I think this is kind of a common occurrence that we experience on our campuses. But you were given a handshake and some keys and then the passwords to various software that you needed to use in your role, and that was kind of it. And I think, as some of us are well aware, that the skills that make us successful librarians and successful faculty members are not necessarily the same skills you need when you transition into these leadership roles. So they are finally looking to find a way to bridge that gap for folks. And currently there's monthly meetings with the whole group. So you have some more seasoned leaders meeting with folks that, it's their first year as chairs or their first year as center director. And then we have panels that might be focused on a specific theme or a special topic, and then folks can ask the participants whatever they want. So I think the next step that's coming in this program is to match new administrators with experienced administrators, if they want that, to have a more explicit mentoring relationship in that way. And I guess lastly, I'll mention a program that we have in our library. I came up in our reference and instruction department, which is one of the largest departments in our library, and it has the most library faculty. And even prior to my arrival, so for over 20 years, I would say that all of the mentoring that took place informally within that department. But at the same time, I remember having conversations We recognize that some of our colleagues in the cataloging and technical services division did not have the same experience, simply because there were far fewer of them. And not that we never talked to our colleagues in the other divisions. Certainly we did. But the needs and the focus and the responsibilities of our jobs were just different enough that we felt like those opportunities weren't the same. So in 2020, we hired a new associate dean for that division. And she and I, in the course of our conversations, again, some more acknowledgement about, not being equity between these two divisions and the faculty and what was happening there. So she and I got together and said, hey, let's see if we can formalize something. So we've been working on that and kind of co-managing it together. And all the informal stuff still happens, and that's kind of organic. Folks meet each other and form relationships around work projects or research projects or whatever it is they're doing. But we also match tenure track faculty with folks who are already tenured. And we have developed a mentoring agreement that they complete. And then at the end of the year, Gwen and I do check-in meetings with both the mentors and the mentees. I guess that's our assessment component, right? To see how things are going, which I think is a very important aspect of it. And then we've made some adjustments, and we feel like this is a living, breathing thing that is developing over time. So I think probably in the future, we'd love to establish something similar for our operating staff as well, some peer mentoring, something like that. That's it.
Thank you very much, Leanne. And Grace, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and telling us about the mentorship programs that you've worked with.
Sure. So hi, I'm Grace Alba. I'm one of a couple of social sciences and humanities librarians at Illinois State's Milner Library. I've been in a couple of positions at ISU for the last decade, and that's sort of my kind of beginning and ending of the professional introductions. In terms of like history with mentoring, I've had a lot of kind of informal experiences with mentoring, all going back from when I was a student all the way through the kind of my professional identity now. However, I was and still am a founding member of Milner's internal mentoring program for the faculty and staff at Milner Library, and currently running as its chair of the mentoring at Milner program. And it started about 4.5 years ago when, during the height of COVID, we actually had about, I think it was 7 new librarians coming in and a couple who had started the year prior. And we needed a way to help them achieve kind of professional development in the beginning and also just kind of like build a community when we were all in lockdown. And a few of us who honestly had conversations about the sort of natural siloing that had been going on at our institution for quite a while. We had been having conversations about like, how do we break that cycle of siloing, especially given the circumstances that we were in. So we sort of, in a grassroots effort, kind of started this mentoring program. With the sign off of administration, but we really wanted it to be a faculty and staff led movement. In the beginning, it was just those with librarian in the title. Milner has sort of different classifications, but we decided to limit it to just like librarians. However, very quickly we realized that if we were going to kind of live by the philosophy that we kind of outlined in our charge, we wanted to expand that out to everyone in the library, currently with the exception of students. So no matter your classification, how many years you've been at the institution, we welcome you into this peer mentoring program. Ours is sort of a dual focused and kind of dual programmatic mentoring program. So again, we have the traditional kind of professional development goals, but we also have, again, that kind of real philosophy of community building and kind of shared communal emotional growth in the library as well. We also, rather than just focusing on one-on-one individual paired mentors, we do that where every mentee has their own mentor. We also have a fairly robust kind of group mentoring program where the mentees kind of have a community of learning amongst themselves as mentees. The mentors have sort of a community of learning amongst the mentors. And we also have kind of large group programs and activities and events for everyone in the program, regardless of kind of where you are. And we've, kind of expanding and growing and moving forward as we go. And that's probably the long and short of the program that I'm involved in.
Wonderful. Thank you all and welcome. So the next question is, how did you get involved with your current mentorship programs? And just to mix it up a little bit, I'm going to have Leanne lead this one.
Thanks, Joshua. So the MAC ALDP program that I talked about, that was one that I had to apply for. That's a competitive process. You have to submit your CV, and I think maybe you have to do a little essay writing and get a nomination from your dean. So I applied for it and was accepted into that. And then later on indicated I would be interested in continuing with the program, like as an alumni or as an alumnus, and serving as a resource for other participants who go through that program. And then the other two programs that are happening both in my library and on my campus, I think I became involved with them partially due to my position in administration, but maybe more just recognizing the needs for these programs in our library and on our campus. And then so seeing that need and then being willing to say yes to opportunities that came our way, and willing to, collaborate with other campus leaders as they were trying to build a program. Sometimes you hear something in a meeting or in a casual conversation, or you see an email and something clicks. And so that's kind of how it happened for me. I just responded to emails and said, hey, I'd be really interested in working with you on this or participating, however you need me. And then when people ask you to talk or go to an event, just keeping an open mind and saying yes.
All right. Thank you very much, Leanne. We'll go in the same order, and we'll go with Grace next.
Josh. So yeah, I outlined a little bit how I got involved in the program on the sort of facilitation side, and so I'll take the time to talk about my time spent, as a participant in the program. Upon intake, so we invite every new member of the library as they come in to become part of the program, but we also make it fairly regularly known that anyone, no matter again how long they've been in the program, mentorship is for everyone. And so if you feel like you need mentoring based on kind of where you are in your position, so if you feel more like a mid-career librarian than an early career librarian, and you feel like that has changing needs and responsibilities, you can enter into the program as a mentee whenever you see fit, essentially. Similarly, we seek out new mentors fairly regularly, both for changing needs and expanding needs, but also just we think a variety of voices and a diversity of voices is important within mentorship. So I've been, in addition to a member of the facilitation team at Milner, I have been a mentor since day one. We ask every mentor to fill out a quick questionnaire about strengths and weaknesses and kind of what you see in terms of value of the program. I filled that out and was matched with one of the initial cohort of mentees. Recently, I've added a second mentee based on kind of the reduction in responsibilities to my first mentee. She's, a rock star and doesn't need me quite as much anymore. But also, the needs of the newer incoming people in the library. And also because of a change in my own responsibilities, I've actually filled out the mentee intake form, and I'm also a mentee. So I'm involved in every level of the program at this point. So yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Grace. Kirsten.
Sure. So each of the programs I have worked with have been tied to my scholarship or service activities. Because I had a leadership role with EIU ISTEM, I was co-director at the time, I was able to leverage that position to push forward establishing our mentoring initiatives. And then based on faculty feedback and my own successful and unsuccessful experiences with mentoring, I realized this needed to be structured as a formal program. So we provide discussion prompts to help engage both mentors and mentees. For the STS mentoring program with ACRL, I served as co-chair of the STS Professional Development Committee for the 2 years that I served on the committee and inherited the infrastructure of a really well-organized program. The committee had just finished revising their program the year prior to me stepping onto the committee. But I was able to help introduce a virtual mentor meetup based on participant feedback, where all participants in the mentoring program are able to get together and talk about issues in STEM librarianship that were related to kind of collectively the goals of the folks in the mentoring program that year. This was an opportunity beyond their one-on-one meetings to get together and meet other folks in the program as a group. Other sections of ACRL have mentoring programs, the instruction section being one notable program because that section is so large and affects so many of us. And ILA also has a mentoring program. So I just had a little asterisk in my notes there. If you want to participate in the ILA program, and I'm assuming everyone on the call is an academic librarian today, you may be paired with a public librarian. I'm not involved with that program at all, but I was thinking there could be a lot of great cross pollination of ideas in the areas of exhibits and programming or supervising and management. So those are opportunities for us. But in terms of the STS mentoring program, calls go out in July and August via the STS section list on ALA Connect. And there is a need for both mentor and mentee participation every year. So if you yourself are interested or you have colleagues who would be interested, I would encourage you to apply. It's a great program to be involved with. And then with IRDL, that was grounded in my research agenda. And I just had the great good fortune to participate in the group because it is really well organized and really well run by librarians Chris Brancolini and Marie Kennedy at Loyola Marymount University in LA.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I'm going to pause for just a moment to talk to our attendees and let them know we do have starting questions that we are going through, but if you have thoughts of questions you would like to ask, contributions that you would like to make to the conversation, please feel free to use the Q&A or the chat to let us know. I think we'll have time to get to them. Please engage with us. And now I'm going to go on to the next question. What makes a successful mentorship program or mentor-mentee relationship? And this time I will start with Grace.
So thinking about kind of the programs as a whole, the first thing that comes to mind for me is flexibility and kind of agility in the program. Every individual is going to have their own kind of unique set of needs, even if generally they come into the program with kind of a shared understanding of mentorship. And so it's up to the program to, you know, seek out the best avenue to help with those needs as well, and kind of, you know, bend as needed for the constituents in the program, right? Thinking about mentorship, it really is the participants in the program really are the important parts of it, right? Thinking about successful mentor-mentee relationship, transparency is the first thing that comes to mind for me, and also vulnerability. You are putting yourself out there both as a mentor and a mentee, to say, I need assistance in this endeavor. I have a question, I have a problem, and I'm, you know, seeking out support in whatever ways. As a mentor, I really think of myself as the advocate for my mentee, and try to support them, obviously professionally, but also just working through some of those kind of human moments as well. How do I work with faculty? My, you know, partnerships aren't working out. I'm having a roadblock with my writing partners. All those things are, yes, professional in nature, but also very personal in nature. And also likewise, the mentors, you have to be vulnerable to be a mentor, both to say like, you know, this is what I'm good at, I can help you, and these are my thoughts, but also to say, this is not one of my strengths. We can't ask our mentors to be all things to all people. And so you have to be able to say, like, I can't necessarily help you in this situation, but I can do my best to find the answer or find the person who can be the solution for you. And so, yeah, just flexibility and transparency and also vulnerability are sort of the buzzwords I'm thinking of today.
Thank you very much, Grace. Kirsten.
Great, thanks, Josh. So in terms of what makes a successful mentorship program, you probably would guess, based on some of what I've teased so far, is that I would be a supporter of a more formal or guided program rather than an informal relationship, unless both the mentor and the mentee are really committed to the informal partnership and probably have experience as being a mentor and or mentee. Or sometimes what happens is if you've participated for a year in the formal program, then and perhaps have really hit it off with your pairing or partner, then those couplings sometimes go off and extend their relationship as more of an informal mentoring experience. But just getting started, I think it's really hard for both participants to know how to direct the relationship without having potentially some discussion prompts sent their way or other structure that a formal program can provide. That being said, thinking about successful mentor-mentee relationship, some of my notes I have made is that both mentor and mentee should be committed to the relationship. And I'm thinking about that in terms of looking ahead before you participate in or apply for a program, looking ahead at your calendar for the year. How much free time would you have or time would you have to devote to that relationship and developing that relationship? Because it does take time to prepare ahead of time before the meeting, kind of gather your thoughts, and then actively participate in if it's a one-on-one or a group discussion, participating there. And then also potentially doing work in between the meetings if there is like something goal-oriented that is related to that pairing. One thing that can help with that, and one thing that some of these programs I've participated in have had, is a goals and expectations sheet at the beginning of the program that both the mentor and the mentee fill out. What are my goals? What are my expectations in terms of how often we meet, how we meet? And then also a component of that could be what course of action would I want to take if this relationship isn't going the way I was hoping it would. So for both mentors and mentees, then as you're meeting, having perhaps, like I said, gathering your thoughts ahead of time, having some questions in mind to discuss can help facilitate that. And then as a mentor, one nice question right at the end of each meeting could be like, what are your goals for the coming month? Or, how can I help you accomplish those goals? Just to kind of help weave the relationship along as well. So a couple other notes I had is one is regular check-ins throughout the mentoring experience. So in some cases, especially with informal mentoring experiences, we didn't have a set schedule or those set expectations. And if the thought is, well, we'll just meet as the need arises, it's really easy for you then to never meet at all. So again, maybe in that goals and expectations sheet at the start of your pairing, is it going to be once a month, which I think works really well for professional mentoring experiences? Or if you're on a really tight time frame, maybe you're going to be presenting in another couple of months or wanting to submit a proposal. Maybe then you're meeting every other week to keep moving that work forward. And then the last piece I would highlight for the program as a whole is that leadership should be really engaged. And I've fortunately had that experience with the program leadership of my mentoring programs have been very engaged, but they're providing discussion prompts regularly throughout the program, perhaps ideas for a shared reading that participants could do or a shared webinar, just to help with facilitating the conversation. A lot of times that stuff isn't needed and the conversations happen organically. But especially as you're getting started out, sometimes it's a little bit more stiff. And so those prompts can really help. And the other thing that engaged leadership can do is help with fostering community. So for example, with the STS Professional Development Committee, creating that virtual mentoring meetup for the group. For EIU iSTEM, we coordinate social events, bowling, game nights. We coordinate professional development opportunities. We have a member of our advisory committee who secured an external grant. So we've been bringing in external speakers, which have been really well received. And potentially the leadership is providing some funding to allow pairs to meet over coffee or over lunch. And also, I think Grace maybe mentioned a feedback form at the end of the program, and then the leadership can look at that and really think strategically about how can we improve the program for future participants.
Thank you, Kirsten.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I feel like Kirsten and Grace were reading from my notes. So I'm not going to repeat everything they just said. I'm in full agreement, but let me just go. Maybe I will highlight some of the things that I feel are most important to me. I think the mutuality aspect is incredibly important, and those mutually agreed upon goals and expectations, like those should be set together, and that should be probably the very first thing that you do. And the mentoring agreements can really help with that. To set that meeting time, to set that commitment, and to let both folks explore what they really want and expect to get out of this relationship. Clear communication always, right? Everybody says they want it, but in addition to wanting it, I think if you're the mentee, you have to be able to describe what that looks like for your mentor. Like what are your preferences in terms of communication? Like if your inbox is already overflowing with email, like email may not be the way that you want to have in between your meeting times, that you want to have communication. Maybe you prefer, sitting down for 10 minutes or grabbing that coffee or going for a walk on a break or something like that. And if you're the mentor, again, that flexibility, right? Listening to what your mentee is telling you and being adaptable. You can, well, this is the way I communicate, or this is the way I've always done it. Even if you've been a mentor, a dozen times, each person is different, and each relationship, both parties bring something, right? That pull upon the dynamic that's happening there. And then one thing I'll also add, as Grace was talking, I was thinking about this. The human side of it, right? I am a very human first manager and a human first mentor. And the human side of it is very interesting to me. Don't be afraid within your relationship, if you're the mentor, to talk about times where you were unsuccessful, where you fell flat. Like the pedestal effect is really kind of weird. I don't approach a mentoring relationship as I am the seasoned professional who is imparting my wisdom. I always view it through the lens of, I think we have something to learn from each other here. And so I'm always the first one out of the gate to talk about a time when I was attempting to do something and it really did not work out, because it's a rare person. I have yet to encounter one that, attempts to do something and is fully successful every time right out of the gate. So reminding our partners of our humanness, of our attempts, and then how we came back from that and were resilient and rebounded, is something that is equally important. Something also that Kirsten said reminded me, some of the feedback we got, at the end of each year when we do the assessment or the evaluations with both the mentors and the mentees, everybody across the board was saying, create more opportunities for getting together, because you never know how a passing comment can turn into an opportunity to collaborate on a project or to co-author an article, just, a random thing that somebody says. And it's true that the people in the room, there's a conversation that can happen just because those people are there. And so it's your job to find it. So that's something that Gwen and I, the other associate dean, and I have been working on this year, is like asking the dean, like, hey, could we have just a little bit of funding for a coffee and treat hour, or, just for something to create create more opportunities for that to happen. Everybody's busy, everybody's schedule is wild. So finding 30 minutes a couple of times each year is really worth doing.
Wonderful. Thank you, Leanne. All right. So for our last question, now it's a hard choice because we've gone around and had everybody start. So do I loop back to the beginning? I don't know. This is going to be a challenge. The fourth question is a two-parter. What would you change? What would you hope for in the future of your mentorship programs? Let's see. Well, I guess I'll ask this way, since everybody's gone first at least once, are there any of you that are just like, ooh, I have an answer all set and ready, I really want to speak?
I've got this.
Okay.
So, all right. What would I hope for? What would I change? I'll just reiterate because I really think it's important. If an institution or group is going to offer a mentoring program, to make it formal. By having something informal, it just isn't really doing justice to what the experience can be for everybody. And then I have three other thoughts related to this. The first would be, what would I hope for? A time commitment from everybody involved. Certainly, we've talked about mentees and mentors, but also even from the perspective of EIU iSTEM, I chatted with a group from another university in Illinois, and I apologize, I don't remember who it was. They have a grant-funded position to lead their STEM student mentoring program, which is amazing. So it is their job for that position to ensure that that program is successful. And so here at EIU, of course, service is part of our responsibilities as faculty on campus, but we also have, as Leanne was mentioning, full plates. So it's been, based on our availability and capacity, who's able to contribute and work to making that program a success. So a time commitment on all levels of the participants in the group, from mentees, mentors, and then coordinators. And Leanne also mentioned funding for like meals, for example. So funding, I would say, not necessary, but nice. We can always find ways to spend money, whether it's on swag or bringing in speakers. Meals is an easy one. Coffee, even if it's not a full-on meal. My thought was, if the institution is willing to put some money towards supporting a mentoring program, they're in essence saying, we value the time you're devoting to your professional development, and we encourage you to take that time. And then the last piece I had was, what I hope for is engaged mentors and mentees, because in the end, and certainly program coordinators too, but in the end, they are what will make or break the success of the partnerships.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kirsten. I think just to break up the monotony of the routine, I'm going to go the other way this time and go to Grace next.
First, I just want to sort of highlight and reiterate what Kirsten and Leanne have both said throughout this whole workshop, this whole panel. So much of it resonates with what kind of we're dealing with and seeing and feeling at our mentoring program. So I appreciate that, like, I don't know, mentoring is universal and we all have similar like goals and experiences, and this has been very validating. I'm going to do what would I hope for first, because putting it out into the universe, to the funding of it all. That was a long-term hope of our program, and it's actually fairly recently become a reality, and it really has given us a lot more flexibility. It's not a huge amount of funding, but it indicates buy-in from administration, and really, makes things a lot easier and smoother on the term at the time of the facilitation team. And so I'm putting it out into the universe too. I really hope for increased buy-in from our civil service colleagues at at ISU. This started out primarily just by virtue of who the mentees were and the needs of the mentees at Milner, to be a primarily faculty engaged project, but mentoring can come from anywhere and every portion of the library, and I think that there are some voices that we're not necessarily hearing in the program, and I would love to see more of that, more of my colleagues in kind of the access services, technical services realms, and again, some of those who have not necessarily felt that they have a lot to contribute, which I think is silly. And so that's what I'm hoping for, is increased buy-in to some of our other colleagues in the library. What would I change? This is probably a cop-out, but I think back to my younger self. I wish I had spoken up for the need for a formal mentorship program when I started. I talked a lot about, as we were starting the program, talking about these shared kind of feelings of being siloed and a little isolated and not really, sort of being thrown into the deep end a little bit when I started at Milner. And I see, this feels like I'm tooting my own horn. I'm seeing how the initial crop of mentees who are now, 3-4 years into their careers here, and how empowered they are, and how, they're seeking out the change that they want to see. And I'm sure it's mostly because they are, really proactive people in real life. But also I think that the mentoring program has a little bit to do with that. And I think back to my younger self and kind of what I could have advocated for if these sort of support structures existed. So that's what I'd change.
Thank you very much, Grace. That's good to hear. And Leanne.
Again, like Grace and Kirsten are just cribbing from my notes here. I don't know, maybe I'll combine a hope and a change. So I think sometimes a lot of the ground that we cover in the mentor relationships are the process side of things. So for example, the annual evaluation processes, and of course, progress towards tenure and promotion. And those things are incredibly important, and especially when you're a tenure track faculty member, like it's everything, right? So that pressure and the anxiety around those things is very real, and it's enormous, right? It was a long time ago, but I remember it very well myself, like it was yesterday. So those things are important, but something I hope for is that folks become unafraid of the real human side of mentoring, asking each other, how are you feeling about things? Noticing who's being included at those get-togethers and who's not being included, who's being excluded, whether it's intentional or not, and bringing everybody together. I think we should try to be a little bit unafraid about walking alongside somebody as they're going through, as you're going through this professional course of your career, like life is happening at the same time, right? There's births, there's deaths, there's illnesses, there's breakups, all of these very things, and these important things, and people bring their whole selves to work. So you can tell this about me. I was a social worker in my former life before I became a librarian, and those values never really left me. I'm a human first manager, but I think it's important. People do bring their whole selves to work, and you can maintain professional boundaries and still be a guide, a resource, a support, and maybe even a rock for somebody as they're on their professional journey, and whatever their goals might be, and whatever the relationship is supposed to be. Don't be afraid to care about each other.
Thank you so much. We do have a question in chat from Amy Odwarka. Thank you, Amy. Amy says, hi all, thanks for all your work. Wondering if any of you have experience asking mentees to use journaling as a way to think through experiences. Success with this? Big fail? Thanks for your thoughts.
jump in quickly with sort of a big fail. Um, we have tried this sort of programming, not quite like a true journaling experience, but we had kind of a shared journaling activity that we were doing at the end of last year, where we had some kind of prompted questions, and we're allowing people to kind of think through them on a shared anonymous Padlet, and giving them time to write out their thoughts and experiences on the Padlet for a couple weeks. And then the plan was to come together and sort of reflect on the anonymous notes and then kind of build on it from there. Our failure on the part of the facilitation team was checking into sort of the temperature and the capacity of our mentors and mentees. I think it was an interesting and valuable way forward. We just picked a time that there was a lot going on and a lot of personal and professional burnout going on in the university. And my colleagues were just like not here to sit and like reflect on practices. But I don't think that means it's a bad activity. Just think we picked the wrong time. So
I'm very intrigued by the idea. I can't say that I have used journaling formally or even informally in mentoring or intentionally. I had one mentee who indicated that they were somebody who liked to journal regularly. And they asked if I would be interested in a shared journal experience. And so that was cool. I really enjoyed it, and it worked for the two of us in that context. Like this person, would write down their thoughts about something, maybe even ongoing, like for a week, and then they would give the journal to me, and then I would read what they wrote and respond, and then add things that was happening during the week. I don't know how to explain it. It was almost like just an ongoing letter and stream of consciousness, but then we would go back and look at those during our meetings sometimes. To talk about it. We were careful to set boundaries. Like, this is not your diary that I'm reading here. They were professionally related. Like, you come out of a meeting and maybe you had an experience where you felt like your colleagues weren't listening or you got cut off, writing that down, how you felt about it or what happened while it's fresh in your mind, I think was valuable in capturing, that type of interaction, and then having somebody be able to read it and respond. So I don't know if that's useful at all, but that's the closest I can come to an experience with journaling.
Wonderful. Thank you, Leanne. Do you have anything to add, Kirsten?
Yeah, I do have experience with journaling with the IRDL program. They had us not every month, but some months we would, mentees would have a journal entry to write, some months mentors, sometimes it was a shared writing exercise. And again, that was kind of to help us continue thinking about the program between our meetings and always be I found it to be a helpful way to reflect on whatever the topic was for that month, even if we didn't necessarily talk about it in our mentoring conversation that we had that month. So I guess it really does depend on the pairings, and some pairings within a cohort would really thrive with that and maybe others wouldn't. So it's certainly helpful. It sounds like, Grace, you had a really good idea and it just wasn't the right time for it or for that particular cohort to be participating, but I'm sure if you tried it again, you'd have better success.
Well, thank you for all of your inputs. I felt my blood pressure rise a little bit at the suggestion of journaling. I always avoid writing a lot. It's something that I don't enjoy very much. If there's a position that I'm running for in leadership, it's never secretary because I don't like to take notes. It doesn't fit well with me. And so it's interesting to see how other people have very different reactions to the idea than I do. Thank you all for your input. We don't have any more questions in the chat.
Can I throw a question out there, Josh? Is that all right?
Yes, please
Okay.
do.
I had a question. Actually, I think Leanne and Grace could both respond to this because I believe you said you both have, well, I know Grace did, but Leanne, you said there's a mentoring program at NIU libraries. Is that right? I'm wondering if there are challenges you see with an internal mentoring program in terms of going back to Grace's comment about transparency and vulnerability, where people might not feel comfortable if there's a hard, the example Leanne had with leaving a meeting and you didn't feel heard or whatever it is, not feeling comfortable, needing advice, wanting to talk with somebody, but maybe not feeling the capacity to be vulnerable with a colleague you see day to day.
So yes, I definitely anticipate and see that as a challenge. One thing that we do is we try to do cross-divisional pairings. And at first people really did not like that idea because they were like, somebody in the other division is just not going to be able to get me or to understand. And we said, please let's just try it. And we found that that was not a cure-all by any means, but it did help with some of that. I don't know, somehow people felt safer, I guess, you know, when it wasn't in their immediate folks that they work with and collaborate in the immediacy. Probably beyond that, I think, so this is not the library program, but the campus program where it's all from all the colleges and all the divisions, and that pairing just happens everywhere. I think that's probably better. I know I myself have mentors on my campus, but I also have mentors at other institutions. And there are times when I'm going to turn towards those folks at other institutions to vent or to get advice just about certain things because.
Yeah, just to echo a lot of what Leanne said, we don't always do cross-divisional matching, but we do think that there is a benefit to having a little bit of distance as much as possible. And so we don't match people who are like closely related in their work unless, you know, it's the only match that makes sense, for example, because we are, you know, we're dealing with a limited pool of people. So sometimes you got to do what you got to do. I would also reiterate sort of the importance of kind of the broader networking within the kind of group mentoring, right? So, you know, yes, we underscore that like mentors are there for those sorts of things, but of course each mentee is going to have a different relationship with their mentor, and that might not be within the capacity of that relationship. And so hopefully the mentoring program can help with those sorts of questions and concerns, in that like they are forging connections with maybe another mentee in the program who they feel more confident and comfortable having those kinds of conversations with, or like, you know, from previous discussions recognize a sort of a shared understanding of those sorts of you know, comments or those sorts of things. And so even if the mentor specifically isn't there to help with every instance, we've at least hopefully set up kind of a safety net of other people. I don't know if that's actually a helpful answer, but
I think that's really important because I would say that the campus wide and then these other programs that were through these various organizations that we all talked about, the networking was like perhaps the most valuable experience in participating in those programs, right? Just because you have this additional pool of resources from which you can draw. So
good question. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, this has been a delightful discussion. We have about 2 minutes left, and I want to take a moment to admit my own bias in this. I work with Grace at ISU, and as she's been talking about this first group of mentors, mentees, I was one of them. And so when the topic of mentorship was introduced in our committee and we said, oh, there might be interest in this discussion, I said, oh, I know just who to ask. So thank you, Grace. Thank you, Leanne. Thank you, Kirsten. It has been a lovely discussion, and I hope you and all of our attendees have gotten some good things to come out of it to move forward and maybe try and create your own mentorship program or incorporate ideas from other programs into your own. There's a lot of use in just coming together and sharing our mutual experiences. And we have a couple of thank yous in the chat. Thank you very much. Have a lovely day.
Great. Thank you,
you.
Thank you
Jeff.
so much.